moving on to staying rather on Pakistan, just to remind you, the Secretary General will be leaving for Pakistan tomorrow. Just before 3 o'clock, I expect him to stop by and say a few words to you at the Security Council stakeout on Pakistan before he addresses the Council on the situation at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Just a quick update for you from the ground there. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that we, along with our partners, have now delivered food or cash assistance to at least 336,000 people impacted by the floods in Balochistan province. Distribution are currently underway for 117,000 people in Sindh province. In addition, we've provided 32 metric tons of emergency supplies to support children and women, including medicines and medical supplies, water, purification tablets, safe delivery kits, therapeutic nutritional supplements. An airlift from Dubai, established by us and our other partners, is going to focus on the worst affected areas in the southern Sindh province. The first three of 9 scheduled flights arrived yesterday with 40,000 sleeping mats, 15,000 kitchen sets, and 5,000 tarpaulins. An additional 6 flights are scheduled in the coming days. According to the government of Pakistan, more than 1,300 people have died and over 12,700 have been injured by the floods. Over 1.1 million houses have been damaged and some 560,000 houses completely destroyed. Over 630,000 men, women, and children are reportedly living in relief camps across Pakistan, most of them in Sindh. Many more displaced people are living with host communities. Access remains difficult, with over 5,700 kilometers of roads damaged and 246 bridges either damaged or destroyed. And staying in the region, in nearby Bangladesh, the UN team there, led by the resident coordinator, Gwyn Lewis, is calling for further resources to help millions of people impacted by recent flooding in the northeast of Bangladesh. The floods have impacted 9 districts, sweeping away homes and inundating the land of some 7.2 million people. Just over a quarter of a $58 million needed has been received so far. Due to limited resources, only 30% of the most vulnerable families are receiving aid. We need more support urgently, with floodwaters not having receded in many cases. Back here this morning, the Security Council heard from Jean-Pierre Lacroix, the head of the Peacekeeping Department. He briefed Council members in an open meeting on the Action for Peacekeeping initiative. As you'll recall, the Secretary General launched this initiative 4 years ago to make our mission stronger, safer, and more effective. Today, Mr. Lacroix called for stronger and more unified support from the Security Council to advance the political efforts of our operations. We've shared his remarks with you, and this afternoon at 3 p.m., as I mentioned, the Secretary General will join the Security Council members in an open meeting on the situation in Ukraine, focused on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Secretary General will brief in person. His remarks have been shared with you under embargo. And of course, you will hear, if I could ask the technicians to cut off whatever sound that is, thank you. Following Secretary General, you'll also hear from Rafael Grossi, the head of the IEA. I think their report on his mission has already been released. In his remarks, the Secretary General will stress that any damage to the power plant, which is Europe's largest nuclear power plant, could spell a catastrophe for not only the immediate vicinity, but the region and beyond. He will also call for a halt to all military activity in and around the plant. We anticipate, yes, and then you'll hear from council members. Meanwhile, our Deputy Secretary General, Mina Mohammed, is in Egypt today, where she has been attending the Egyptian International Cooperation Forum. She met today with the UN country team and regional directors, as well as youth and civil society. She also held meetings to prepare for the 27th Conference of Parties on Climate Change for COP27. On Sunday and Monday, the Deputy Secretary General was in the Netherlands, where she attended the Global Adaptation Summit. Yesterday, Ms. Mohammed spoke at the official opening ceremony of the summit held at the headquarters of the Global Center for Adaptation. And on Sunday, she met with the head of the Global Center of Adaptation, Patrick Verkooyen, also with Sigrid Kaag, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, to discuss development cooperation and the forthcoming GA. A quick update from South Sudan, where a new report issued today documents violations of international human rights law and humanitarian law in the country's unity state. The report done by the UN mission in South Sudan and the UN's Human Rights Office says hostilities have claimed the lives of some 173 civilians. Nearly 40 women and children were abducted, many of them subject to rape. The Secretary General's head of mission, Nicholas Haysom, said that human rights violations were committed with impunity, and he stressed that the government is duty-bound under international law to protect civilians, investigate allegations of human rights violations, and hold suspected perpetrators accountable in compliance with fair trial standards. And from Myanmar, our colleagues there tell us that the people in Myanmar continue to bear the brunt of continued fighting in a crippling economic situation has been compounded by increasing inflation. Nearly 1.3 million men, women, and children are now displaced across Myanmar. This includes more than 947,000 people displaced by the conflict since the military takeover in February. In addition, 330,000 people, the majority of them in Rakhine State, remain displaced from previous conflicts. Aid workers are gravely concerned over the impact of resumption of full-scale fighting on civilians in Rakhine State and southern Chin State. Food has become unaffordable for many people, and agricultural production has fallen due to the high cost of inputs as well as displacement. Aid workers also continue to face issues. Unimpeded humanitarian access must be granted, and bureaucratic obstructions must be removed to allow the delivery of services to people who need them. Despite such challenges, our partners have continued to scale up their work, reaching nearly 3.1 million people in the first half of this year alone. The humanitarian response plan for Myanmar is only 17% funded, and it calls for $826 million US. And just to note on China, the UN resident coordinator for China, Sid Chatterjee, tweeted today how the UN is deeply saddened by the tragic loss of lives and destruction caused by yesterday's earthquake in Sichuan province. He said the thoughts of the entire UN family in China are with all those affected. The team stands ready to assist and support the government of China's valiant rescue efforts. And you will have seen that we issued a statement yesterday in which the Secretary General strongly condemned the attack that took place in Kabul on Monday in the immediate vicinity of the embassy of the Russian Federation. The Secretary General conveys his condolences to the families and deceased and wishes a speedy recovery to those injured. He reiterates that attacks against civilians and civilian objects, including diplomatic missions, are strictly prohibited under international humanitarian law. Related to Afghanistan, you will have seen that we have a new head of mission in Afghanistan. Late on Friday, we announced that the Secretary General appointed Rosa Otunbayeva of Kyrgyzstan as his new special representative and head of the mission UNAMA. She, of course, succeeds Deborah Lyons, to whom the Secretary General expressed his gratitude for her dedicated service. For those of you who don't know Ms. Otunbayeva, she has over 35 years of senior experience in leadership, diplomacy, and civic engagement, including as president of the Kyrgyz Republic from 2010 to 2011. And further to his visit to Rabat in July and the trip he concluded recently in Tindouf, the personal envoy of the Secretary General for Western Sahara, Stéphane de Mistura, is holding meetings with other concerned interlocutors in the region. Yesterday, he traveled to Algiers to meet with the Algerian authorities. He is planning to travel to Nouakchott for meetings with the Mauritanian authorities on September 10th. In the course of these regional engagements, Mr. de Mistura continues to look forward to deepening the consultations with all concerns on the prospects of constructively advancing the political process on Western Sahara. In doing so, he intends to remain guided by the clear precedents set by his predecessors. And lastly, also on Friday, due to the vagaries of the calendar, but it was longer awaited, but only issued on Friday afternoon, we have Secretary General appointed Abdoulaye Bathily of Senegal as the head As the special representative for Libya and head of the UN mission support mission for Libya, he succeeds, of course, Jan Kubiš of Slovakia, who previously served as also special envoy and head of mission, to whom the Secretary General expresses his gratitude for his service to the organization. Mr. Batili brings to the position over 40 years of experience with the government of Senegal, academic institutions, regional organizations, and the system of the UN. We are also appointing, Secretary General, is also designating Ms. Agnhild Spence of Norway to take up her new post as the development coordinator in Kosovo. That took place yesterday. And tomorrow we will have a packed guest briefing. We will be joined by Anita Bhatia, Assistant Secretary General and UN Women's Deputy Executive Director. She will be joined by Maria Francesca Spatolisano, the Assistant Secretary General and Head of Policy Coordination in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and Katie Tobin, the Senior Program Manager for Women's Environment and Development Organization. They'll be here to brief you on the progress of the Sustainable Development Goals, the gender snapshot, and Paulina will mention you another briefing that will take place at 12:30. We may have to start the briefing a little earlier tomorrow. Earlier, yes, a little earlier to fit in everybody. James.
So to the West Bank first. A Palestinian man, 29-year-old Mohammed Sabah Anir, has been killed by Israeli forces. The reports suggest that he was actually live streaming an Israeli raid in Jenin when he was killed. Your reaction?
Okay, I have not seen that report. We will look into it, and obviously any loss of life needs to be fully investigated.
Well, as you'll be aware, there was an incident earlier this year involving the Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who the Israeli military now say they probably killed, but they're not promising any. Well, they're not going to carry out any investigation. It doesn't seem to be there'll be any accountability. And I'm deliberately asking you about this after what I've just asked you about has happened in recent hours, because these incidents are going to continue to happen if they're not proper investigations and accountability, surely.
The Secretary General has taken note of the results of the Israeli military investigation into the killing of your colleague, Shireen Abu Akleh. Secretary General maintains his call for accountability for those responsible for the killing, and reiterates yet again that journalists must never be the target of violence or must be able to carry out their work freely, without fear of harassment, of intimidation, and of course, without fear of being killed. Edith.
A follow-up on that. Will the Secretary General be conveying his call for accountability to the Israeli government?
Well, we're conveying it very publicly, and I have no doubt our colleagues in Jerusalem will also be conveying it directly.
The IAEA report on Zaporizhzhia is out, and the IAEA is calling for a safety zone around Zaporizhzhia. Does the UN support this call?
I mean, it's in line with, I think, what you can expect the Secretary General to call for and reiterate his call for demilitarization in and around the plant. We just cannot afford any sort of mishap, accident, or any other type of incident in what is Europe's largest nuclear plant for obvious reasons. Ibtisam.
Follow up on the issue of the killing of Palestinians. I mean, you talked about accountability, but as a matter of fact, from the beginning of this year, there were, if I'm not mistaken, about 140 Palestinians who were killed by Israeli forces in different circumstances. We didn't see any accountability. So my question here is, when you talk about accountability and not putting pressure on the Israeli government, isn't it just kind of empty words when it comes from the perspective of Palestinians?
Listen, I can't speak to the perspective of the Palestinians. I can only speak from the perspective of the Secretary General. He cannot force the Israeli government or any other government, frankly, to do these kinds of investigations and accountability. He will publicly and privately reaffirm his call for accountability, and he will continue to do that.
I have a follow-up on your statement regarding the visit of Ms. Amin Mohammed to Egypt, and I assume she met, I think I saw somewhere that she met also with Egyptian officials. Did she bring the issue of human rights violations and political prisoners in by the Egyptian government in Egypt? Did she talk
I
about
don't have a
this?
full readout of her meetings, but I will try to get one. Okay. Amélie.
A question on Ethiopia. The UN Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa met with the US Special Envoy yesterday over there in Ethiopia. What the aim of her visit, and does she plan to meet any other officials? I mean, is there some kind of attempt to replace the African-led mediation in this conflict?
There is no attempt on part of the UN to replace the African-led initiative. We are there to support those initiatives. Just to be clear, Ms. Tete is based in Addis. So that's, I mean, just so there's no, it's not part of a travel. She did tell me yesterday she met with Mr. Hammer, the U.S. Special Envoy, I think, who briefed her on his efforts. I understand that she may, at some point, be briefing the Security Council on Ethiopia in the coming days, but we're waiting for some details. James. Edward, I just see you holding the mic but not raising your hand, so I think it's confusing to me. Thank you.
So a couple of different things. The Russian ambassador Nebenzia, has complained about the fact that Russian diplomats were not able to get to the UN COPS event that took place here, that they didn't get their visas in time, and he's raising questions about whether the visas will be granted for high-level week for Russian diplomats. What's the Secretary General's view on this and the obligations of the host country?
This is an issue that we have repeatedly brought up with the host country. This is an issue that was raised to us by the Russian Federation. I think the Secretary General feels very much that visas should be delivered to the Russian delegation and to delegations who have business to be done at the United Nations, especially during the General Assembly.
It's a repeated problem.
I know, and it's one we...
so at what level is the Secretary General... is he dealing with this?
It's one that we have been repeatedly raising, because you said it's been going on for quite some time. The legal counsel is the point person on this. It's done through a legal office because they support the host country committee. But I know this is an issue the Secretary General, I think, has raised in a number of phone conversations with senior U.S. officials as well, and one that has been raised with him by Foreign Minister Lavrov as well as permanent representative Nebenzia.
And one other question concerning the U.S. The U.S. is claiming that North Korea is supplying Russia with weaponry. That would clearly be a breach of UN sanctions. What would be the Secretary General's reaction if that's true?
We have no visibility to either confirm or not confirm those things. I think the issue of potential violations of Security Council resolution is one that will be raised through the appropriate channels. Yep.
Hi, Steph. Another topic. Yesterday, the National Computer Virus Emergency Response Center of China just released a report saying that after months of investigation, they believe that National Security Agency of the United States has been attacking the China Northwest Polytechnical University server for months, if not for years, and has been stealing over 140 gigabytes data. Are there any resolutions or international norms from the that endorses by the United Nations on the cybersecurity issue?
It's a very good question.
Because
I know,
really
and I will
love-
get back to, because I do, I mean, the issue of cyber warfare is one that the Secretary General has spoken about quite some time, for a number of times, and the issue of lack of regulation. Whether or not cyber warfare is mentioned into any UN treaty or resolution, I will not venture to speak off the cuff on that, and try to get back to you on that.
But does the Secretary General think it's appropriate or impropriate for a state-sponsored
I mean,
agency
I
to,
have no,
you know,
I have no way. You know, we've seen different member states issue these types of reports accusing each other. We do not have our own investigator capacity in that regard, but it is not a state secret that this has been going on globally, and probably increasingly so.
So you think the member states should solve these problems themselves?
That's an answer to most of the problems that we face today. Edie.
On a completely different subject, there was an attack on a convoy in Burkina Faso that killed at least 35 civilians. Does the Secretary General have any comment on that?
Yes, we've seen we've seen this, and I can tell you that we strongly condemn this attack, which killed and maimed and wounded a large number of civilians. Yet another example of these types of attacks we've seen across the Sahel, and we think it's very important that the authorities in Burkina conduct a swift investigation and bring those responsible to justice. Ibtisam.
So back to Libya and the appointment of representative for the SG. So just to clarify, he's going to be based in or in Libya?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he's the special representative, the head of mission, the person we have been waiting for, at least in this room, if not in Tripoli, for quite some time. And I'm just sorry the announcement came late on a Friday, because it would have given me great joy to make this announcement. And he should be deploying very soon.
Okay, so back to that.
Yeah.
As you know, and you were asked about it, the fact that there was officially an open objection from the Libyan government to his appointment. Do you believe, I think James asked you about it and maybe also others, do you believe that does the Secretary General believe that this will affect negatively his work going forward?
First of all, the reactions that we've seen from various, the main political quarters in Libya has been positive. We very much hope that Libyan political leaders, civil society leaders, Libya's neighbors from far and near will all support the work of the special representative as he helps and supports the Libyan political establishment to come together for the good of the Libyan people. Monsieur.
Merci, Stéphane. Since his appointment, Mr. de Mistura never came to this room or online. Is there any way he can meet us?
Well, there's a way for me to ask him, but we'll see once he concludes this tour. You know, I've worked with Stéphane for a long, long time. He is not one to shy away from speaking publicly, but I think he will do so when he thinks it is in the best interest of his mission, but I will ask him. Speaking of someone who's not shy from speaking publicly.
Just want to follow up on the new SRSG in Libya. because you say the reaction was,
Yeah, yeah.
was positive. Yeah, I think they were being polite, but you know, you,
Well,
you saw the letter.
No,
you
no,
saw the
I-
letter that was sent by the Libyan ambassador using the word astounded that the Secretary
Well,
General was,
I mean-
Secretary General was pressing ahead with this appointment because they had reservations.
Look-
So just explain to us, why did the Secretary General decide, forget about Dbeba's government, we're just going to appoint this guy?
Well, I think, first of all, politeness is very important, right? And we take people at their word, okay? The fact that we had not had a special representative for a long time was not for the Secretary General's lack of trying. It's not a state secret that a number of names were floated. There was lack of unity in the Security Council. We found a candidate where there was unity in the Security Council. It was consulted far and wide. People expressed their opinion, which is normal. We hope now a new page has been turned and Mr. Batili will be welcomed warmly and constructively in Tripoli. Speaking of constructive, Paulina, your turn.